everyone, TheThriftyMommy here today, and today I'm going to do like a throwback Thursday style video where I talk about something from the past. And yeah, so some of you guys have watched for a long time and have little bits and pieces of this story, but I figured I'd put it all into one video before Jaxson gets way too old. I mean, he's pretty old for this kind of story anyway, because it's my birth type story. But I had a little bit of a different experience with him, so I figured it would be a decent topic, and maybe some of you guys would know some of the warning signs. And I am not, and I repeat, I am not trying to scare anyone. This is not the norm of what is going to happen if you are expecting. So if you are like really close to your due date, maybe don't watch it, because I don't want to spook you or anything like that. So anyway, we'll get started back to my pregnancy with him, and then I will kind of just touch on the more important areas, and we'll go from there. So right away when I was pregnant with Jaxson, I got a super dark line right away, and during one of my ultrasounds, they had seen 2 fetal poles, and that was just like an early one because I did have some spotting and stuff in the beginning. But then shortly after I had announced to the whole entire everybody in the whole entire world that I was pregnant, I woke up in the middle of the night with extremely heavy bleeding and clotting and things like that. And I just thought right away, that's it. This pregnancy is done for. I am losing the babies. And I went in for another ultrasound, like I think it was the day after that, and they didn't see anything, and they did a pelvic exam and confirmed my fear was that I was in the progress of a miscarriage and was no longer carrying any babies at all. They had suggested to me to take Cytotec. I got a prescription from them for Cytotec, which I'm not 100% sure what Cytotec is originally for, but what they were intending it for me was to kind of rush along the process of the miscarriage. Now, I got home and I talked about it with my husband, and I said I wasn't comfortable with Cytotec. I had heard some not so good stuff about it when used in labor, and I wanted to do some more research on my own before I just started taking this medication. And the thing I kept coming back to was, if this, you know, my body can do this. My body, this is a natural process. It's not a process I wanted to be doing, having a miscarriage, but it's natural, and I didn't want to introduce medications, and I figured I would let my body do it naturally. I'll keep going in for my beta test to make sure my levels get down below, what is it, like 5? I think 0 to 5 is normal range, or something like that, 0 to 3, I don't remember. And I figured I would continue doing my beta tests, and if there was a problem later, then I would discuss it. But I mean, women have miscarriages all the time, and I knew that it's a natural thing and that I just wanted to do it naturally. Plus, in the back of my mind, I kept having this feeling that I was still pregnant and that they were wrong. And my husband really thought I was losing my mind, because I continued to take pregnancy tests, and day after day, sometimes twice a day, and I saw my line getting darker, and I was like, why is my line getting darker if I'm miscarrying? So I did a multitude of beta, is that what it's called, beta tests? HCG test? I can't remember what they're called. I think it's the beta number or whatever. So my first one was 42, which they said was on the lower end. And then my second one was 28, so it had dropped. And then I went back in for my third one, and it all of a sudden just like tripled. So I went in for another ultrasound because they were not expecting my numbers to rise again, and they thought it was really weird how they went down and then back up. So we went in for another ultrasound, and at that point they saw Jaxson's sac. They didn't see the baby, they didn't see a heartbeat or anything like that. So they still were not entirely hopeful, and told me that I was still probably in the process of miscarriage. And I had another beta blood test done, and it came back more than doubled again within, I think it was 48 hours. or was it 72 hours? I think they were having me do every 72 hours or something. Anyway, so then at that point I went back again and had another one done, and at that another ultrasound done. And finally, we saw the little flicker of the heartbeat, and they said that it was vanishing twin syndrome. And a lot of times you will either pass the twin, or the surviving twin will absorb the other twin, or my body would absorb the other twin, or whatever. So I ended up having really heavy bleeding and things like that for a week and a half, 2 weeks. And then after that, everything kind of just leveled out and got normal for a while. And then the one thing I can say is I switched OBs immediately, because I remember being in such a vulnerable state on the table with my legs in the stirrups, and she said some not very good things. It made me really uncomfortable. But the one thing that really bothered me the most is she goes, "It's okay because it wasn't a baby anyway." And that's just not how I feel about it. And it was one of the worst things I think you can say to someone who's in the middle of a miscarriage, you know? So I switched and I went to a different OB, and then kind of didn't have any problems for the longest time. At around the 20th week, the anatomy scan, they saw the 2 choroid plexus cysts, which are cysts on the brain, and he had bilateral ones, so one on each side. So we had to go for a level 2 ultrasound. At the level 2 ultrasound, they noticed he wasn't moving properly. They couldn't get measurements on his thigh bone, and they could not view his heart. So they were really... Hi, baby. So they were kind of concerned there, and they never did, because he stayed in that position the entire time I was pregnant with him. So I really didn't know. We never knew until he was born what was going to happen. Another one of my coworkers had the same thing, and when her son was born, he did have Down syndrome, so that was an idea that I thought maybe would happen with Jaxson.
Mom, what happened?
Well, you had a toenail. So I was wondering if that would be the case with Jaxson. I also know they were talking about, what's it called, trisomy, what was it, 18? Is that what it is? Because I know one is Down syndrome, but anyway. So I really had no idea. And then things kind of went okay again for a while. I started having problems with my blood pressure in my 3rd trimester, and it was quite high. I was very swollen. If you watch my video a while back I did of Jaxson, I'll put it maybe in the description box if I remember, of when he was a baby. I was so swollen. I wasn't that fat necessarily, but it was like my face and even my hands, you could even see I had a hospital bracelet and it was swollen. So I did have problems with blood pressure, and they kind of just kept, you know, we'll just keep an eye on it and everything. And it was like my 2nd to last appointment I went to, and I was 35 and a half weeks at this time. No, I was 35, and I was almost 30, I think it was one day shy of 36 weeks. And I had an ultrasound done, and they wanted to see his size because my measurements weren't changing, and they thought maybe he had stopped growing. And they guesstimated him to be about 3 pounds, which is quite small for 36 weeks. And the next day I ended up having a regular doctor's appointment again with the OB, and we went in, and it was time, because my preeclampsia had gotten so bad that they said I was at risk of a stroke any minute. So they sent me right over to the hospital, and I had him. Delivery itself was pretty uneventful. I had a C-section. He was a small baby. He was 4 pounds, 2 ounces. Can't remember the length. It was like 17 or 18 inches long. And he was really healthy, and I felt pretty good. I had the worst headache I had ever had in my life. And they said that was from the magnesium that they were giving me and from my blood pressure, because it was still really high. And I just remember how bad my head hurt. It was the worst headache I had ever had in my life, and I was actually a little worried that I was about to have an aneurysm or something like that. Honestly, it was that bad. And I remember they had me hooked up to like heart monitors and stuff, because I had just had a C-section, and my heart rate kept going weird, and it just wasn't right. It was really high, and I didn't think anything of it. They would come and shut off the machines or switch the machine, and it would stop beeping, and they would leave. And by the 4th day, the day I got discharged from the hospital, I was feeling pretty good. I was up and walking around. My headache finally went away. My heart rate was still high, a lot higher than normal, but I figured they're not concerned about it, then I'm not concerned about it, and they sent me home. And I think it was a day or two, how many days? 3 days I was home? I think it was the 3rd day I was home. I started having a lot of pains down below, like uterine pain. And the only way I can describe it is like early contractions. Well, by that night, and I'm just going to refer to them as contractions because that's as I came to find out what they actually were, but by that night, I was almost screaming, I was crying. My mom was staying here for the first little while Jaxson was born, and she heard me and came upstairs and asked what was going on. And I said, I am having contractions every 2 minutes. Thank you. I said, I'm having contractions every 2 minutes. I don't know what's going on. This is so painful. I couldn't talk through them. I would talk normal in between, and then when one would hit, that was it. I could not talk anymore, and I had to breathe through them, and I thought this is just the strangest thing I've ever experienced in my life because I already had my baby. So why am I having contractions? So my first thought was they left something inside during the C-section, like a surgical sponge or a retractor, you know. And my mom thought they left a baby behind. But I honestly thought they left like a surgical sponge or a retractor or something. You've heard of those horror stories. And I don't know, we were having some financial difficulties at the time, so I did not want to go into the ER right away. And I ended up going to my OB the following morning as soon as I could, and she in turn sent me to the ER where I should have gone in the first place. It got so bad that every time I had to pee, it just hurt to pee, and not hurt to pee in the sense of like a UTI, but like contractions. Like every time I would start to use the restroom, I would have these intense contractions, and it was so painful. And so I went to the ER, and they kept telling me I had a UTI, which I said, no. That I may have a UTI in conjunction with whatever's going on, but I think I'm dying. And that was the first time in my life where I really, truly thought I was going to die. I remember telling Chris to make sure that the boys knew how much I loved them, and that, you know, all these different things. I remember telling Chris over the phone, because Chris was home with the baby, with my mom, and I was in the hospital by myself, and I would call him, and I was crying, and I said, I'm going to die, and I told the doctor, I think I'm dying. And anyway, after I think it was like 6 hours in the ER, they finally gave me a CAT scan, and they said I was hemorrhaging, and it's called a, oh, what was it, a bladder flap hematoma or something like that, and it had gotten infected by this point because it had been so long untreated. So they said I had one tennis ball's pretty large, one tennis ball sized blood clot on the bottom end of my uterus, between my uterus and my bladder, right along my incision line. And as that clot got bigger, it was causing my uterus to contract because it was irritated, and because it had just been cut open. So I was actually having contractions when I wasn't even pregnant. And then I had two, what are they? Ping pong ball? Tennis? No, ping pong ball sized blood clots on the top end of my uterus, and I was still actively bleeding. So I got admitted right away, and apparently this came as a shock to me. Your body will reabsorb this blood and this clot by itself, but what the problem was, that it was a clot, it's a warm, moist, nutrient-rich environment for bacteria to want to go to. So I ended up with a pelvic infection and a uterine infection, and I want to say blood infection, I can't remember. And they had me on all sorts of antibiotics. I ended up getting phlebitis in my arms because the medications they were giving me were so harsh, so I couldn't bend my arms, and my veins were like hard, and they were stuck out of my arms, and it was really painful. So I think I was in there for about 2 weeks, or was it 2.5? You don't remember? I think I was in there for about 2.5 weeks. And throughout this whole time, I didn't get to see Jaxson at all. And I was kind of depressed and very tired. And I came home from the hospital still in pain. I still had like low-grade fevers, and it still hurt to go to the bathroom, and I was still having not contractions, I would call them spasms at this point. I was having spasms every time I had to go to the bathroom or when I was standing up. But I would say within a month from when he was born, I was finally feeling a little bit back to normal. So it took a good long month from when the hemorrhaging started to when I started feeling a little bit better. So that's kind of my story. So I just wanted to say, you know, if you have recently had a baby or a C-section and you notice something's a little off, trust your gut and get your booty to the ER, unlike I did, because you're risking your life if you don't. And don't ever think, oh, you know, it's just pain from the C-section or whatever. If you really feel like there's something going on, you need to get in, because looking back on it, I actually risked my life by not going into the emergency room when I should have, and it could have easily gone the other way. I ended up losing a lot of blood, and yeah. Anyway guys, my camera is running out of space. I need to clear my card really bad. I need to just remember to do that because it's Veda, and now my phone's ringing, so I'm gonna go. I'll see you guys tomorrow. Bye.